I'm holding my father's wedding ring right now. Not the one he wore when he married my mother, the one he wore when he married someone else. My hands are shaking so hard I can barely keep it steady, this simple gold band that's been burning a hole in my palm for the last 20 minutes. Sarah? His voice is barely a whisper from the hospital bed. My Sarah? I can't breathe. The antiseptic smell of this place, the beeping machines, the way the afternoon light cuts across his weathered face, it's all too much. 23 years. 23 years of believing I wasn't good enough, that we weren't worth staying for. Hi, Dad. The words crack coming out of my throat. He's crying now, these silent tears streaming down his cheeks. I looked for you, he says, his fingers reaching toward me with such desperate hope. I looked for you everywhere, but I couldn't remember where you were. I couldn't remember how to get home. The ring is warm in my palm. Maria's ring. The woman who loved him after his accident stole his memory, after traumatic brain injury erased us completely. She kept this ring for him, died believing he'd want his children to have it. All his children. I never stopped being your father, he whispers, and something inside my chest that's been frozen solid for decades finally cracks open. Even when I couldn't remember your name, I drew pictures of a little girl. You. Always you. I'm 28 years old and I'm 5 again, standing in our living room watching him walk out the door. Except he never walked out. He got lost. He got lost and spent 16 years loving another family while trying to remember ours. I forgive you, Dad. The words surprise me. They taste like salt and relief and 23 years of carefully constructed walls crumbling down. I forgive you for getting lost. His smile breaks my heart and heals it simultaneously. Sometimes the most important things come wrapped in the wrong address, delivered to the wrong door, carried by strangers who have no idea they're changing your entire world. This isn't just about a ring anymore. This is about coming home. I was 28, working as a graphic designer from my cramped studio apartment in Portland. My life had this comfortable predictability to it: coffee at 6 a.m., emails until noon, freelance projects until dinner. Same routine, every single day. I'd built this quiet, controlled existence because chaos terrified me. My apartment reflected that need for order. Everything had its place: art supplies organized by color in clear plastic containers, bills filed alphabetically, even my tea collection arranged by caffeine content. Mom used to say I was methodical, but really I was just scared that if I didn't hold on to everything tightly enough, it would disappear too. Most mornings I'd sit at my kitchen table with my laptop, editing logos for small businesses while watching my neighbor's family through the window. The Johnsons had this beautiful chaos: kids running around the backyard, Dad grilling on weekends, Mom hanging laundry that never seemed to match. I'd find myself pausing mid-project just to watch their father flip burgers while his daughter tugged on his sleeve, demanding attention he freely gave. That hollow ache would settle in my chest then, this father-shaped hole I'd learned to walk around but never quite filled. I called Mom every Tuesday at 7 p.m. sharp. She'd remarried when I was 12 to Paul, a kind man who tried his best but always felt like he was stepping around landmines when it came to me. During our calls, Mom would update me on Paul's garden, their weekend plans, her book club. Safe topics we never talked about before. Before Paul, before stability, before we learned to build a life around someone's absence. You should date more, sweetheart, she'd always say toward the end of our conversations. Put yourself out there. But putting myself out there meant risking someone else walking away, and I'd already survived that devastation once. Better to keep my world small and manageable. I had 3 close friends from college who occasionally dragged me to happy hours, a yoga class I attended religiously every Thursday, and Mrs. Chin next door who brought me soup when I was sick and never asked uncomfortable questions about my family. My freelance work was thriving. I specialized in clean, minimalist designs that eliminated unnecessary elements. Clients loved my ability to strip away complexity, to find the essential core of their brand. What they didn't know was that I applied this same philosophy to my entire life: remove anything that could hurt you. Weekends were for meal prep, cleaning, and personal projects. I'd been working on a series of digital illustrations about urban loneliness, faceless figures in coffee shops, empty park benches, single lights in apartment windows. Art therapy, my college professor would have called it. I called it paying the rent. Sometimes I'd catch myself staring at family photos on social media, wondering what it felt like to have that unconditional presence in your life. To have someone who'd choose you every single day, who'd fight to stay even when things got difficult. The few relationships I'd attempted always ended the same way: the moment they got too close, I'd find reasons to push them away. Self-preservation disguised as incompatibility. I remember thinking, the morning before everything changed, how settled I felt in my controlled little world. I'd made peace with my limitations, accepted that some people were meant for grand adventures and others for quiet, careful lives. I was watering my succulents, plants that required minimal care and rarely died, when I noticed the Johnsons' father teaching his son to ride a bike in their driveway. The boy kept falling, getting back up, trying again. And his father kept running alongside him, hand on the seat, steady voice offering encouragement. "I've got you, buddy. I'm not letting go." I turned away from the window then, that familiar ache rising in my throat. Some promises, I'd learned, were impossible to keep. Some people let go whether they mean to or not. The trick was building a life that didn't depend on anyone's grip staying steady. I had no idea that 24 hours later, everything I believed about letting go would be turned completely upside down. It was a Thursday morning in October when the doorbell rang. I almost didn't answer. I wasn't expecting anything, and delivery drivers usually just left packages by my door with a quick knock. But something about the insistent second ring made me look through the peephole. Young guy, probably early 20s, brown uniform, holding a medium-sized box like it weighed more than it should. He kept shifting his weight from foot to foot, checking his clipboard twice. The crisp autumn air hit my face when I opened the door, carrying the scent of wet leaves from last night's rain. October in Portland always smelled like new beginnings and endings all at once. "Sarah Chen?" he asked, double-checking his clipboard again. "That's me. Sign here, please." He handed me the electronic pad, his finger tapping nervously against the side. "And, this came through a forwarding service. Been bouncing around for a while, looks like." The package felt wrong in my hands immediately. Not the usual Amazon box or padded envelope I was used to. This was wrapped in brown paper, tied with actual string, the kind of packaging that suggested someone had taken time, had cared about presentation. The address label was handwritten in careful cursive, slightly smudged from its journey. My name and address were correct, but something about the ink color seemed faded, like it had been written months ago. "Thanks," I managed, closing the door behind me. I set it on my kitchen counter and just stared. The return address was partially torn, but I could make out Portland Memorial Hospital stamped in faded blue ink. The weight distribution was odd, something heavy settling in one corner, something lighter shifting around when I tilted it. My hands were actually trembling. This wasn't mine. Someone else's mail, someone else's life accidentally delivered to my carefully ordered world. The ethical thing would be to call the post office, report the mistake, let them sort it out. But that handwriting, there was something almost familiar about it. The way the S in Sarah curved, the deliberate spacing between letters. And why would a hospital be sending personal packages? 10 minutes passed. Then 15. I made coffee, checked my email, rearranged my succulents, anything to avoid the brown paper package sitting on my counter like a question I wasn't ready to answer. The curiosity was eating me alive. My hands wouldn't stop shaking as I finally untied the string. The brown paper fell away to reveal a small cardboard box, the kind jewelry stores use for special occasions. Inside that, 3 items that would change everything: a small velvet jewelry box, a manila envelope thick with documents, and a handwritten letter on hospital letterhead. I opened the jewelry box first. A simple gold wedding band caught the kitchen light, its surface worn smooth from years of wear. I lifted it with trembling fingers, feeling its weight, and that's when I saw the engraving on the inside, "Forever yours, M&D, June 15, 1987. The world tilted sideways. My parents were married July 20, 1985. I knew that date by heart. It was written on the marriage certificate Mom kept in her bedroom drawer, the one I'd stared at countless times as a child, trying to understand how something that was supposed to be forever could just end. This was a different marriage. A different life. A different woman whose initial was M. My legs went weak and I had to grip the counter to stay upright. The ring felt like it was burning in my palm, this impossible piece of evidence that my father, the man who'd walked out on us when I was 5, had loved someone else enough to marry them. Had promised them forever while we were still waiting for him to come home. The letter was written in the same careful handwriting as the address label. "Mr. Davidson, I'm writing to inform you that your wife, Maria Elena Davidson, passed peacefully on October 2nd. She asked me to send you these personal effects, as she believed you would want them returned to your family. She spoke of you often in her final weeks, wondering if you'd ever found peace with your decision to leave Portland all those years ago. Davidson." My father's last name before he married Mom, before he took our family name of Chin in what I'd always thought was a romantic gesture. But he'd gone back to it. He'd been David Davidson to this Maria woman, not David Chen. The manila envelope contained documents that made my head spin, a death certificate for Maria Elena Davidson, aged 52. A copy of a marriage license dated June 15, 1987, 2 years after he'd left us. Hospital records showing David Davidson as next of kin. And at the bottom, a faded Polaroid photograph that stopped my heart completely. My father, maybe 15 years older than when he'd disappeared from our lives, standing next to a beautiful Latina woman with kind eyes and long dark hair. His arm was around her waist, and they were flanked by 2 children, a boy who looked about 8, a girl maybe 6. All 4 of them were smiling, genuinely happy, in front of what looked like a modest house with a red front door. He looked happy. Happy in a way I'd never seen him with Mom and me. I sank onto my kitchen floor, the photograph clutched in my hands, 23 years of carefully constructed assumptions crumbling around me. All this time, I'd carried the wound of not being enough to make him stay. But he hadn't just left us, he'd left us for them. He'd built a whole new family, a better family, one worth staying for. The children in the photo had his eyes, his stubborn chin. They looked loved, secure, like they'd never doubted their father would be there tomorrow. Everything I'd longed for as a child, he'd given to strangers. But why was this woman, this Maria, sending his ring to me? The letter suggested he'd left Portland, left her too. Had he abandoned them as well? Or had something else happened? My phone buzzed with a work email, jarring me back to reality. I was sitting on my kitchen floor surrounded by evidence of my father's secret life, holding a wedding ring that belonged to a dead woman who'd somehow known my name and address. Nothing about my carefully controlled world felt safe anymore. I spent 3 days staring at that photograph, unable to focus on anything else. Work emails went unanswered, client deadlines became meaningless. I'd memorized every detail, the way my father's hand rested protectively on the boy's shoulder, how the little girl's smile mirrored his exactly, the genuine contentment in his eyes that I'd never seen in pictures with Mom and me. The first call was to Portland Memorial Hospital. "I'm trying to locate information about a patient who passed recently," I told the receptionist, my voice shaking. "Maria Elena Davidson. She died October 2nd. Are you family?" The question hung in the air. Was I? I received some personal effects by mistake. I'm trying to return them to her family. 20 minutes on hold. Finally, "I'm sorry, but patient information is confidential. You'll need to contact the family directly." But I didn't know how to find them. Davidson was too common, and I had no idea where they lived now. I spent hours online, searching obituaries, social media, public records. Maria Elena Davidson, Portland nurse, survived by husband David and children Miguel and Sophia. No current addresses, no contact information. Just this shadow family that had somehow intersected with mine 23 years ago. My second call was to Mom. I waited until our usual Tuesday slot, then couldn't bring myself to ask. How do you tell your mother that the man who shattered your family had built a new one? That he'd been David Davidson to them, not David Chen? That maybe our love wasn't the problem, maybe we just weren't the solution he was looking for. You sound tired, sweetheart, Mom said. Everything okay? Just work stress. The lie tasted bitter. Mom, do you ever wonder what happened to him? After? A long pause. Oh, Sarah. We've been through this. Some people aren't built for staying. Your stepfather Paul is proof that the right person will choose you every day. But what if Dad hadn't chosen to leave? What if something else had happened? The breakthrough came through LinkedIn of all places. I'd been searching for Davidson family members in Portland when I found her, Sophia Davidson, elementary school teacher, age 22. Her profile photo showed the same dark eyes from the Polaroid, now belonging to a young woman who looked confident and kind. My hands trembled as I typed the message. Hi Sophia. I know this will sound strange, but I received a package meant for your family after your mother's passing. It contains some jewelry and personal items. I'd like to return them to you. My name is Sarah Chen. I attached a photo of the ring. She called me within an hour, sobbing. You're Sarah, she whispered through tears. Oh my God, you're Sarah. Mom never stopped looking for you. Looking for me? But I don't understand. I don't know your mother. Your father. Sophia's voice broke. Sarah, your father didn't abandon you. He was in an accident. He couldn't remember who he was, couldn't remember you or your mother. Mom was his nurse. She tried to help him remember, but the brain injury, he'd lost everything. The kitchen started spinning. That's impossible. Mom kept newspaper clippings about the search for him. Your mother filed a missing person report. The police thought he'd left voluntarily, but Mom always suspected something traumatic had happened. He would have nightmares about a little girl, would draw pictures of children he couldn't name. We thought they were imaginary, but Sarah, it was you. He was trying to remember you. 23 years of believing I wasn't good enough, and he'd been trying to find his way back to me the entire time. Sophia, where is he now? The pause that followed contained worlds of sorrow. He's dying, Sarah. Early onset Alzheimer's. He's in a care facility, and most days he doesn't recognize anyone. But lately he's been asking about someone named Sarah. Sarah, there's something else, Sophia's voice was barely a whisper through the phone. Something Mom made me promise to tell you if we ever found you. My heart was already racing from learning about Dad's accident, his memory loss, but something in her tone made my blood run cold. The package wasn't supposed to come to you by accident, she continued. Mom sent it to you on purpose. What do you mean? Before she died, Mom hired a private investigator to find your mother. She'd been carrying this guilt for 20 years, Sarah. She fell in love with a man who couldn't remember his own name, and part of her always knew she was living someone else's life. The room started tilting again. I gripped the counter, trying to process what she was telling me. Mom knew about us? She suspected. Dad would wake up screaming sometimes, calling for Sarah and Lynn, that's your mother's name, right? Linda? He'd draw pictures of a little Asian girl with pigtails. We thought it was just brain trauma creating false memories, but Mom kept everything. She had boxes of his drawings, recordings of him talking in his sleep about teaching someone to ride a bike, about bedtime stories and pancakes shaped like butterflies. Tears were streaming down my face. He remembered making me butterfly pancakes. Even with his broken brain, he'd held on to that. The investigator found your mother last month, Sophia continued. Found out she'd remarried, that you'd grown up thinking your father abandoned you. Mom was devastated. She realized she'd built her happiness on another woman's heartbreak, another child's abandonment trauma. But she didn't know, I whispered. She couldn't have known. That's what I told her, but she was dying, Sarah. She needed to make it right. The package was supposed to be the first step. She was going to include a letter explaining everything, but she passed before she could finish it. I found pages of drafts in her nightstand, all trying to find the right words to tell you that your father never stopped being your father, even when he couldn't remember your name. I was sobbing now, ugly tears that came from somewhere deep in my chest. 23 years of believing I wasn't worthy of love, and all along he'd been trying to find his way back to me through the fog of his broken mind. Sophia, is he? Can I see him? Another pause. Sarah, he's in the final stages now. Some days he's completely gone, but other days he's our dad again. And lately, in those moments of clarity, he keeps asking for Sarah. He says he needs to apologize to Sarah. Apologize for what? For getting lost, she whispered. He says he got lost and couldn't find his way home to Sarah. The weight of those words hit me like a physical blow. All this time I'd been angry at him for choosing to leave, and he'd been angry at himself for not being strong enough to remember his way back. I want to meet you, Sophia said suddenly. You and Miguel, my brother. We want to meet our sister. Sister. The word hung in the air between us, impossible and perfect. I'd spent my whole life as an only child, believing my father had walked away from the family he'd made. But he hadn't walked away, he'd been stolen by trauma and circumstance, and somehow, impossibly, Maria's love had kept us all connected. Sophia, I managed through my tears, is there a chance he'd remember me? If I came to see him? I don't know, she said honestly. But Sarah, whether he remembers you or not, you need to know, you're in his room. Mom hung some of his drawings on the wall, the ones of the little girl. He stares at them every day. You've been with him all along. I sat in my apartment for 3 hours after hanging up with Sophia, staring at that photograph of the family I should have been part of. The family I would have been part of if not for a single moment of bad luck 23 years ago. My father was dying. He was dying and asking for me, and I had maybe weeks, maybe days, to decide if I was brave enough to walk back into the wreckage of both our lives. I kept running the conversation with Sophia over and over. Some days he's completely gone, but other days he's our dad again. What if I showed up on one of the gone days? What if I sat beside this stranger who wore my father's face and felt nothing? What if 23 years of longing and abandonment issues crashed into the reality of a sick old man who couldn't remember why I mattered? But worse, what if I showed up on a good day? What if he looked at me with recognition and I saw all that lost time reflected in his eyes? 23 years of birthdays he missed, graduations he couldn't attend, heartbreaks he wasn't there to comfort. How do you forgive someone for being human enough to get hurt so badly they forgot you existed? I called in sick to work and spent Thursday walking around Powell's bookstore, trying to lose myself in other people's stories. But every book I picked up seemed to mock me. Romance novels about second chances. Memoirs about family reconciliation. Self-help books about forgiveness. The universe had a sick sense of humor. Friday morning I woke up from dreams of butterfly pancakes and my father's voice reading Goodnight Moon. I hadn't thought about that book in 20 years, but suddenly I could hear him perfectly, the way he'd change his voice for different characters, how he'd kiss my forehead when he closed it. That's when I knew I didn't have a choice. I'd spent my entire adult life building walls to keep people from getting close enough to leave. I'd chosen safety over connection, control over love, because I was terrified of being abandoned again. But my father hadn't abandoned me, He'd been torn away by circumstances beyond anyone's control. And now I had a chance to choose differently. Maybe he wouldn't remember me. Maybe seeing him would break my heart all over again. Maybe I'd discover that the father I'd idealized in my longing was just a regular man with regular flaws who'd lived a regular life without me. But maybe, just maybe, there would be recognition. Maybe somewhere in his failing mind, he'd kept a small, sacred space for the daughter who used to fall asleep in his lap while he read to her. Maybe love was stronger than brain trauma after all. I picked up my phone and called Sophia. "I want to see him," I said when she answered. "I want to meet you and Miguel first, but then I want to see our dad." "Are you sure?" she asked gently. "It's going to be hard, Sarah. He's not the man in that photograph anymore." "I know. But Sophia, I've spent 23 years believing I wasn't worth staying for. Even if he doesn't remember me, I need to know I was brave enough to try. I need to know I didn't give up on us the way I thought he did." "Okay," she whispered. "Sunday afternoon? There's a coffee shop called Stumptown on Division. Miguel and I will be there at 2. After I hung up, I sat in the quiet of my too-clean apartment and felt something shift inside my chest. For the first time in years, my carefully controlled world felt small instead of safe. Maybe it was time to let it get a little messy. Maybe it was time to come home. Meeting Sophia and Miguel felt like looking into a funhouse mirror of my own genetics. Sophia had my father's stubborn chin, Miguel his laugh lines around the eyes. We sat in Stumptown Coffee, 3 strangers who shared DNA and 23 years of parallel grief. "He used to make us pancakes shaped like animals," Miguel said, stirring his coffee nervously. "Always asked if we wanted butterflies, but we usually picked dinosaurs or cars." "He made me butterflies," I whispered. "Every Saturday morning." Sophia reached across the table and took my hand. "Mom was right. You really are his daughter." The next day, we drove to Sunset Manor together. The hallway smelled like disinfectant and resignation, but Sophia and Miguel walked it like they belonged there, greeting nurses by name, comfortable in this world of endings. "Room 237, Sophia said, stopping outside a door painted cheerful yellow. "He's having a good day. He ate breakfast," recognized the nurse. "But Sarah, don't expect too much, okay?" I nodded, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. He was sitting by the window in a wheelchair, this frail man in his 70s who somehow still had my eyes. When he looked up and saw me, his face cycled through confusion, recognition, disbelief, and then something that looked like relief. "Sarah?" His voice was paper-thin. "My Sarah?" I couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. After 23 years of wondering, here was my answer. He remembered me. "Hi, Dad." The words cracked coming out. He started crying immediately, these silent tears streaming down his weathered cheeks. "I looked for you," he said, his hands shaking as he reached toward me. "I looked for you everywhere, but I couldn't remember where you were. I couldn't remember how to get home." I knelt beside his wheelchair and took his hands in mine. They felt exactly like I remembered, strong fingers, calloused palms, the same hands that had taught me to tie my shoes. "You were hurt, Dad. You had an accident. It wasn't your fault you couldn't remember. But I should have tried harder," he whispered. "I should have fought harder to remember my little girl who loved butterfly pancakes." The fact that he remembered the pancakes broke something open in my chest. "Dad, you did fight. Sophia told me about the drawings, the dreams. You never stopped trying to find your way back to me." "I never stopped being your father," he said, gripping my hands tighter. "Even when I couldn't remember your name, even when Maria was taking care of me and I felt guilty for loving her when I knew I was supposed to love someone else. There was always this empty space where you belonged." I was crying now, ugly sobs that came from decades of buried pain. "I thought you left because I wasn't good enough. Because Mom and I weren't worth staying for." "Oh, sweetheart. His voice broke. You were everything worth staying for. You were the reason I kept trying to remember, even when the doctors said my memories were gone forever. Every drawing I made, every nightmare about losing something precious, that was me trying to find my way home to you. Miguel and Sofia were crying too, standing in the doorway watching their father reunite with the daughter they'd heard about in fragments and dreams. Can you forgive me? Dad asked. For getting lost? For not being strong enough to remember how to come back? There's nothing to forgive, I whispered, meaning it completely. You never abandoned me, Dad. You got hurt trying to live your life, and sometimes that happens. Sometimes people get lost through no fault of their own. He smiled then, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him, and suddenly I could see the father who used to read me bedtime stories, who taught me to ride my bike, who promised he'd always protect me. I love you, Sarah. I never stopped loving you. I love you too, Dad. And I'm here now. We're all here. You know what's funny about healing? It doesn't happen all at once like in the movies. I spent 6 months visiting Dad twice a week, and some days he knew exactly who I was, would light up when I walked into his room. Other days he'd call me Maria, or just smile at me like I was a pleasant stranger who'd wandered into his afternoon. But those good days. God, those good days were everything I'd been missing my whole life. He'd tell me stories about my childhood that I'd completely forgotten. How I used to insist on wearing my Halloween costume to grocery stores in July. How I'd make him tea parties with imaginary guests and get genuinely offended if he didn't use his fancy voice for the stuffed animals. How Mom would hum while she cooked dinner, and he'd dance with her in the kitchen while I giggled from my high chair. Your mother had the most beautiful laugh, he told me one Tuesday in December. Like wind chimes in a summer breeze. I used to do silly things just to hear it. For the first time in 23 years, I could picture my parents as young people who'd loved each other, not just as the broken couple in my childhood memories. The really profound shift happened in my everyday life. I started answering my door without checking the peephole first. I know that sounds small, but for someone who'd spent years terrified that people would disappear, learning to be open to unexpected visitors felt revolutionary. I moved to a bigger apartment and got a roommate, Jenny, this bubbly marketing manager who leaves dishes in the sink and plays music too loud. 6 months ago, I would have been miserable. Now I find her chaos comforting. It means someone else is here, choosing to stay in my space day after day. I started dating too. Really dating, not just the careful coffee meetings I used to do. I met David, yes, David, which felt like the universe having a sense of humor, through a friend's party. When he told me he wanted to introduce me to his parents after 2 months, I didn't panic and find excuses to end things. Instead, I told him about my father, about the package, about learning that love doesn't always look like staying but sometimes looks like fighting your way back through impossible odds. Work changed too. Those urban loneliness illustrations I'd been creating? I scrapped the whole series and started painting families instead. Messy, complicated, imperfect families. Fathers teaching children to ride bikes. Mothers humming in kitchens. Siblings meeting for the first time as adults. My art finally had hope in it. But the biggest change was in how I talked to Mom. We had dinner last week, and for the first time ever, we talked about the before times. About Dad, about how scared she'd been when he disappeared, about how hard it was to rebuild with Paul while still loving someone who'd vanished. I'm proud of you, she said, tears in her eyes. For finding him. For forgiving him. For forgiving all of us for not being perfect. Miguel and Sofia have become the siblings I never knew I needed. We text daily now, sharing photos and inside jokes. Sofia's teaching me Spanish words that Dad used to mutter in his sleep. Miguel's been scanning old family photos so I can see what holidays looked like in the house where Dad lived after his accident. The truth is that Misdelivered package didn't just bring me my father's ring. It brought me back to myself, the part of me that believed in love that lasts, in family that fights to find each other, in the possibility that sometimes getting lost is just the first step in a longer journey home. I wear Maria's ring on my right hand now, not as a reminder of what I lost, but of what I found. Love is complicated and messy and sometimes tragic, but it's still love. And sometimes, if you're really lucky, it finds a way. I'm holding my father's wedding ring right now. Not the one he wore when he married my mother, the one he wore when he married someone else. But today, as I sit in this same kitchen where I first discovered it 6 months ago, it doesn't feel like evidence of betrayal anymore. It feels like proof of something beautiful. This ring belonged to Maria, the nurse who loved a broken man back to wholeness, who gave him a second family when his first one was stolen by circumstance. She kept it safe for 20 years, knowing someday it might find its way to the children he couldn't remember. She died believing in love that transcends memory, in connections that survive even the cruelest accidents. Dad passed away on a Tuesday in March, surrounded by all his children. Me, Miguel, and Sofia. In his final moments, he was completely lucid, and he looked at each of us and whispered, "I'm sorry I got lost." But I don't think he was lost anymore. I think he'd finally found his way home. The ring catches the afternoon light now, and instead of seeing betrayal, I see the full circle of our story. A man who loved 2 families in 2 different lifetimes. A woman who died making sure those families found each other. 3 siblings who discovered that blood isn't the only thing that makes you family. Sometimes shared loss and shared healing can do it too. Sometimes the most important deliveries are the ones that get lost for a while first. Sometimes you need 23 years and a stranger's kindness and a woman you'll never meet who loved your father enough to make sure his children found each other. Sometimes the wrong address turns out to be exactly where you need to end up. That misdelivered package didn't just bring me my father back, it brought me back to believing that love finds a way, even when memory fails, even when time runs out, even when hope seems impossible. Some miracles come wrapped in brown paper, tied with string, carried by strangers who have no idea they're about to change your entire world.